I believe that it's only Eastern Europe problem. I believe that it's only countries that are economically unstable, they have this global problem, but I realized that it's at our doorsteps. So 10 years ago, I'll just share my experience in the United States. We started to work with J1 international students. It's students who come every summer. In fact, before COVID, 5,000 students from 35 countries come here for work and travel to Cape Cod and islands. And we encountered a girl who came as a J1 student, and she was abused by a landlord who took advantage of her, and unfortunately she was raped and she went back to Ukraine. So she's in the movie as well, and we've learned that it's an issue here. And also landlords and employers that can take advantage of beautiful Eastern European girls. And today we have a lot of refugees that come from Ukraine. So we started community support, and we've learned that they're truly vulnerable. Especially on social media, you might see an ad, look, Ukrainian girl from Ukraine, refugee, help her out. And you can see from the picture there's something out there, the false promise that I talked to you about. So with this experience that I shared with you, we decided with my friend to make a movie about human trafficking in the former Soviet Union. You can find it on YouTube, Human Trafficking in the Former Soviet Union. And as we watch it, it's in Russian and it has subtitles. Please take your time to sit down and take a moment of silence and think about the ways you can get involved and be a solution to this global issue, which is at our doorstep, as we learned. So please take your time to go back and look at the cards that you can write words of encouragement to women that are survivors of human trafficking and part of the outreach that Jasmine is doing so wonderfully. So we have some, Mel will actually give an instructions how to do that, right, Mel? So come in and give a hand to Mel, because Mel is the person who brought Jasmine here. So she will give you little instructions.
Yeah, so the cards, Jasmine, with every bag of hope that she sends out, she likes to put an encouraging card in there. And we have some guidelines, some things kind of do's and don'ts, but also some inspiration that you may, if you're like, I don't know what to write, there's some inspiring quotes, some scripture, wherever your heart leads you, or just write a letter to somebody, hey friend, we care about you. And it can be as simple as that, and it can mean so much. So I have a table back there with all the supplies you need, so come see me back there and we'll talk about it.
Wonderful. Let's give a hand to our media, because we have this recorded to show later. We know that media is a powerful tool as well, and tool of education. So please, you're welcome to stand up, grab a card, write an encouraging note, and think about things that you can do to be a solution to this awful global issue that we have at our doorsteps as well. So thank you, Andrew and David. Thank you very much.
Если только я перееду туда, за океан, моя жизнь будет другой, она станет лучше. Этот фильм посвящен осведомлению об human trafficking, человеческом рабстве, сексуальной эксплуатации.
Всегда очень важно знать контекст страны или местности, где ты находишься. Например, в нашей стране очень многие люди мечтают о том, чтобы покинуть эту страну и уехать из Молдавии. Многие мечтают уехать в Европу, другие мечтают уехать, то есть в Россию, может быть, на Украину, то есть куда-то уехать, покинуть эту страну, как бы не видят будущности и надежды в этой стране.
Государство устроило здесь, в Чиневе, общежитие специально для детей и подростков, которые после интерната. И они сделали им, чтобы они имели общежитие, где жить, а уже как кормиться, как дожить каждый день, должны сами найти работу. Молодежь уже заканчивает, например, школу, они каждый день тянутся к тому, чтобы что-то зарабатывать. Особенно молодежь, потому что они бы хотят устроить свою жизнь, и особенно девушки тоже ищут работу, и ищут, чтобы была хорошо оплаченная работа, и поэтому и попадают под влияние вот тех, которых вызывают их за границ, например, берут паспорт, дают деньги, все устраивают. И, например, сначала говорят, что вы, девушки, там будете работать, я слышала такие случаи, вы, девушки, будете там работать швеей или на кухне работать, а когда уже по дорогах туда идут, то говорят, что они будут зарабатывать как проституции. Уже жизнь их разрушена.
Вот ей было 20 лет, мужчина был в 2 раза старше ее, у него была семья, у него были дети. И как бы она, знаете, она как девушка из Украины, она, наверное, не думала, что вот такая ситуация с ней может случиться, как я уже говорила. Она общалась с ним, и через какое-то время он конкретно начал к ней приставать. То есть это были такие конкретные сексуальные домогательства. Постоянно приставал, где-то вот, если была какая-то возможность, зажимал ее в каком-то темном углу. Знаете, ну вот начинается все с простого. Это поглаживание, это комплименты. Ну, началось все с комплиментов, как хорошо она знает английский. То есть и как хорошо она владеет вот, умением общаться. То есть началось все с этого. Потом где-то он начал задерживаться на работе с ней вместе, якобы подбить какие-то результаты дня, то есть какой-то сделать отчет, то есть вот в таком вот формате.
То есть доверие постепенно.
Да, все начиналось с общения. То есть вот что, как бы, знаете, опаснее всего такие ситуации тем, что они разворачиваются вот с мелочи. И все начиналось с общения. Девушка не подозревала, чем это может для нее обернуться. Она с ним общалась просто, но она, во-первых, боялась, потому что это был ее начальник, и она не хотела, знаете, сразу его как-то отпугивать, да, ну просто человек, незнакомая страна, да, она хорошо владела английским, но она там никого не знала, она приехала одна совершенно. И потом через какое-то время он начал конкретно склонять ее к интимным отношениям, просто конкретно предлагать. Она отказывалась, очень долгое время она отказывалась. И я не знаю, почему так произошло, я не знаю, как он ее к этому склонил, я не знаю, что случилось, но я знаю, что потом ей пришлось сделать аборт.
Как бы существует, можно так сказать, 2 категории людей. Когда мы встречаемся с людьми и общаемся с ними, они спрашивают так: ты где? И чем занимаешься? То есть, и, как правило, отвечают так: я в Италии, или я в Испании, или я, например, в Португалии, я в Англии, занимаюсь этим. Или отвечаю так: я пока что здесь, но готовлюсь, то есть уехать как бы отсюда. То есть мышление в основном молодежи на то, чтобы покинуть эту страну, уехать из этой страны, для того, чтобы искать жизнь получше, для того, чтобы
written for people who speak Russian, obviously, and you can go home and watch it on YouTube. It's called the human trafficking in the former Soviet Union. The human trafficking in the former Soviet Union. I just realized it might take more time, and the subtitles on the back you cannot really see clearly. So with that, I just want to give you a little background about the movie. It took some risk to make this movie, to be honest with you. When I decided to go to Moldova, which is a hub of Eastern Europe, of human trafficking, and Ukrainians, usually girls especially, alert into that. As we went, there were a couple moments where I thought, I'm not sure if I'll come back alive. But it's truly a business out there. And I just found out recent statistics that from 38 to 46 million of people in the world are trafficked. Can you imagine? That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people. Let it sink in a little bit. And no one is immune from this problem. So with this being said, I would like to actually present a chairperson of Cape Cod path, and they actually do this. They actually do the educational part of human trafficking. And Janice, would you please come up and share about your wonderful nonprofit and what you do and how we can get involved and partner with you to make our communities safer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for hosting this wonderful event. First, I would like everyone to take a deep breath in and exhale, and I want you to think about all the people that have been trafficked and are still being trafficked today. And so bring your awareness to that. Let's take a deep breath in. Thank you. So Cape Cod Path was established around 2014. And since then, it has grown into a wonderful volunteer task force of a lot of individuals that are doing the work. And we're basically here to educate, to spread the word, and out there as possible. So many people that we talk to say, not on Cape Cod, and they look at me with astonishment, like this can't possibly be happening. So we're here to do events all over the Cape. We're asked different organizations, a lot of times churches. We have synagogues we've been to, HAC. We have a lot of different places that say, could you come and educate our community? So that's what we do. And we have a brochure, we have a website and a Facebook page. And our website basically has a lot of this on it, but it has current information too. What arrests have been made, what's going on in Barnstable, what's going on in Boston, what's going on all around here in your community. And so we're here to educate. And this pamphlet has risks so that you can say, wow, you know, something doesn't just seem right with these individuals. You know, there's an older gentleman or older woman, and they have a young person, and someone tries to talk to that young person. They don't look at you. They look down. They don't respond. Just if you feel a different kind of feeling in your stomach, like butterflies or something, this isn't right, then what should you do? One of the things you do is you call the local police. They can do a wellness check. And they can just anonymously, you can call them, and they can check things out. There's also, besides calling the local police, there's a 1-800 number here too. There's so many things that we can do right now to take action. And one is we have freedom stickers that we go into places like this and community places in the bathroom stalls. We put a little freedom sticker up. If you need help, be free, text be free. So that information is right there. And convenience stores are the best place to put these in too. Because if one person is being trafficked, many times that evening or during the day, if they go into a convenience store just to freshen up or whatever, they can see that. And sometime that may click, yeah, I need to get out of the life, and how can I do that? Jasmine is an incredible person who, the book is amazing what she wrote, and she can shed a lot of light on things. So we have, I have a sign-up sheet here too. If you're interested in a presentation, contact us. If you're interested in joining our task force, we'd love to have you. We meet once a month right now via Zoom, but we'd love to have you. So I don't want to take any more of your time, but I do have some more brochures that you can pick up and check out our website, and you know, our information is on here as well. But again, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Janice. It's a wonderful nonprofit, Cape Cod Path. And now I will have my friend Mel. She actually brought Jasmine here. Jasmine is her friend, and she will give a biography and proper introduction to our main speaker tonight. Thank you very much.
So I'm honored to introduce you to a dear friend of mine. Jasmine and I crossed paths 9 years ago in 2014 when I was 1 year into my career as an advocate in my home state of New Hampshire. I've been working in the field for over 10 years now in various roles. When I met Jasmine, I worked at a crisis center and imminent danger shelter for survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. It's crazy it's been that long, huh? Jasmine came to train our group of advocates that I was a part of at the Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence in New Hampshire, sharing her story bravely and educating us on how to serve the survivors we were working with better. Since then, I volunteered with Jasmine's organization, witnessing the incredible work she does firsthand. And my heart has been really broken for those who have walked this path. No girl, woman, boy, or man should ever be for sale. In years since we've started working together, Jasmine has become a good friend to me on my own healing journey as a survivor of child sexual abuse and sexual assault, and as a woman of faith. She's an amazing friend to have in your corner. It's an honor to share my dear friend with you all tonight. You'll truly be moved by her story, her authenticity, her ability to be real and honest, to make us laugh in the midst, and to help all of us understand the true impact of the commercial sex trade. You'll be inspired by her amazing team of women that stand beside her tonight, and I'm so excited to share her with all of you. As a survivor of sex trafficking and drug addiction, Jasmine is an effective keynote speaker, panel participant, and facilitator for trainings, workshops, and groups. She has spoken on 3 panels at the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights and at 3 events for members of the United Nations in New York. In addition, Jasmine consults with healthcare professionals, law enforcement personnel, educators, and nonprofit organizations. She advises on issues such as safe homes, program growth, curriculum development, survivor support, and peer mentorship. She is the founder of Jasmine Grace Outreach, author of The Diary of Jasmine Grace, Trafficked, Recovered, Redeemed, and is a remarkable and compassionate voice and support for survivors everywhere. It is my complete honor to introduce you tonight, Jasmine Grace.
You make me cry. I love you. How does that work? How do we? Oh, how's that? Is that better? Can you hear me? I'm a loud Italian from the North Shore. You can hear me? I'm not soft-spoken at all. Okay, is that better? Good? Okay. So thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be here. Yes, it took me over 2 hours to get here. So I do apologize. I was a few minutes behind. Well, more than a few minutes. And I feel like a few of you have heard my story before. I know Cape Cod Path. I'm grateful to reconnect with some of those women. But I was here last year, too. So if you were here last year and heard my story, can you raise your hand? Because I feel like there are some familiar faces. Okay. So we do have the majority of people who haven't heard my story. All right, because I always feel like, wow, you have to hear it again, to continue to repeat myself. But people tell me on my team they've heard my story a million times, and they always learn something new. So I hope this sheds some light, raise some awareness, and help educate you on what trafficking looks like. So if you saw me pulling into the parking lot, I wasn't speeding, okay, officer. I drive a minivan, right? Like you would never imagine. I'm a mom, 5 kids. We're a blended family. I homeschool the 2 smallest. And I've been out of the commercial sex trade and clean and sober for 15 years. And yeah. And you probably would never imagine that, right? If you just saw me driving around in my minivan on a regular day. But that's all because of my recovery and how hard I've worked to maintain that recovery. And really, for me, my Christian faith plays a big role in that recovery. I became a Christian early on. Once I got clean and sober, I was doing the 12 steps and trying to figure out that life of recovery. And through the 12 steps brought me into this relationship with a higher power. And I figured out for me that was God through Jesus, and I haven't looked back since. And so you see this product here, where I can share my story in a way that's empowering and not full of shame, and I'm not going to cry. And I obviously have this ministry that I've been doing for maybe 10 years, and I help empower other survivors who are where I used to be. And I'll tell you one thing that we all have in common back then is looking through the lens of a victim, right? Because that's what they are. They've been victimized. So when we think of trafficking, especially here in the States, we have to wonder, how does this happen, right? No little girl dreams of becoming a prostitute. That's not something on our list. I wanted to be a teacher, a hairdresser, a veterinarian, right? I loved animals. I brought home every stray cat in the neighborhood. And I grew up in a big Italian Catholic family, like I had mentioned, and had a big extended family, but my family of origin was really small. So you have to think about the vulnerabilities and where we come from for the whole story. That's what I'm trying to help you understand. That especially kids who are running away from abusive homes, that are being sexually abused as kids, that are experiencing physical, domestic violence, emotional abuse, those all are push and pull factors. And if the average age into the commercial sex trade is between 12 and 14, which it is, that's a fact, and these young kids have these vulnerabilities and these abuses happening to them young, and maybe they're running away or they're in and out of the foster care system, or they're in and out of group homes, and the traffickers know where the group homes are, and they hang out on the corner and they wait for the runaways. Statistically, it is proven that when young girls, I'm going to speak from that woman perspective, run away from a group home, they're approached by a trafficker in the first 48 hours. And so when a trafficker comes along and promises you what was so freely taken is now going to get paid for, this seems like an upgrade. Okay, and that dial's already been turned because of that former abuse. It becomes normalized, right? Some of these girls who end up in the commercial sex trade, statistically, 80 to 90% of women who end up in prostitution were sexually abused as children. Okay, so my vulnerability wasn't that. I simply came from a home, again, very small, mother and father who are still married to this day. And I had a brother who was 10 years older. We had different fathers. And he was sexually abused around 7 or 8 years old. So he was already dealing with a lot of trauma by the time I came around. So he wasn't really interested in building that kind of older brother relationship. And my mother, unfortunately, suffered severely with mental illness. And my father worked a lot to provide for the family. So I was left on my own a lot from a young age, right? I essentially raised myself. And back then, when you're looking for love and attention, where do you find it? On the streets, right? Nowadays, online. The number one place predators, traffickers are going to be are online. And that's where you really have to watch what your kids are doing online, because they don't hang out in the malls anymore. They don't hang out on the streets. They're all indoors, online, and they're getting approached by predators daily. But for me, growing up on the streets, not really having any positive, good influence in my life. I didn't have any older sisters or aunts or anyone to pour into me, help me realize my self-worth. And I was just on a mission to do the next thing. I went to cosmetology in high school, got my cosmetology degree and a high school diploma, went to community college to be a journalist. I wanted to be a writer for a fashion magazine. I had dreams, I had goals. I did experience sexual violence as a teen. I was 13 or 14, and unfortunately, again, hanging out with the wrong people, spelling love, S-E-X, so I didn't know that's not what you were supposed to do. And if I wasn't giving it away, I was experiencing sexual violence, so I was raped at least twice. But I don't remember the details because of the blackouts from the drinking and the drugging. So all that kind of plays in together, and you know shame isn't the number one tool to keep us sick and to keep us hidden, and we make sometimes decisions out of that place. But by the time I'm 19 years old, drinking and partying in nightclubs. Is anyone from the North Shore? One lady. Two, yeah, you're with me. You don't count. One lady. Okay, but you're younger than me. So there was a nightclub called the Palace. Oh, okay. Maybe you drove all the way up to go to the Palace. Oh my God. Right. So I was there, underage, drinking. It was designed for this type of setup. The men had to be 21, but the women could be under 18 to get in. Of course, you don't realize all this, and so I'm there, I'm drinking, and I'm hanging out with some friends, just graduated, working in a hair salon, again, figuring out life, and I meet a guy who knows some friends, so he's not a complete stranger, so I want to help you understand that trafficking doesn't always happen where you get kidnapped, or, most women or people who get trafficked know the person who's exploiting them, because what do? They build a relationship with them. And so I'm at this nightclub. He knows some friends of mine. He's not a complete stranger. He brings me to the bar, and he spends $7 on me, and I'm impressed, right? Because that's all it took, because someone paid attention to me. And he was handsome, and he had a lot of cash, and he had jewelry, and he was dressed nicely. And we get together a few days later, and he shows up in his Mercedes-Benz, and I'm intrigued. I never dated a guy like that. And a lot of times now when I speak to high schoolers or even middle schoolers, I let them know, hey, note to self, don't date the drug dealer, okay? It's probably not wise. But again, our culture, our society pushes towards that, especially the rap hip hop culture. You know, the more money you have, the more bling, the more of a fancy car, like this is all good, and we like it and we're intrigued by it. And it's, again, glamorized. And you always have to realize that the commercial sex trade is always sold as women's empowerment, right? So you do remember the movie Pretty Woman, okay? I watched that as a kid. Why, I don't know. But Julia Roberts was amazing in that movie. And you have to realize that that, again, shapes our thoughts and attitudes towards certain things. And I will tell you, the 8 years that I was involved in the commercial sex trade, Richard Gere never showed up in a Lamborghini and put a string of pearls around my neck, okay? Because that's not what it's really like. But this is what is sold to us. And as long as a trafficker can work on your prior vulnerabilities and then sell you the fact that the commercial sex trade is empowering and make you believe you chose it, then you stay longer because it's your fault. But you don't realize that you're making the choice out of already a place of abuse, neglect, prior grooming, right? So it's like choosing between garbage and crap, right? So is it really a choice? No, it's an illusion of choice. And there is a small portion of women who are in the commercial sex trade that call themselves sex workers. And they say this is empowering and it's their choice and it's consensual. And they even push for full decriminalization of prostitution. They say it will drop the crime rate and it will empower women to make choice and to be able to support themselves. But at the end of the day, I know that sex should never be called work. And that we can definitely empower ourselves in today's age and educate ourselves to do better and bigger things. And so, all that to say, when I met my trafficker, he, you know, again, had all this glamorizing money and cars and all this. How do you have a trafficking situation? You have a trafficker, a sex buyer, and then the victim. And they're all coming out of a broken system, obviously, vulnerabilities. My trafficker thought it would be okay to sell women and make a profit. And he was being taught the rules of the game by other older pimps and traffickers. So sometimes it's generational, right? Your father's a pimp, you're a pimp, your uncle, your cousin, and it gets passed down. Other times it's that street mentality. You know that selling drugs and guns is a lot more risky, and selling women is more profitable and not as obvious. You get pulled over on the highway with a trunk full of cocaine, you go to jail right away. You get pulled over with a woman in the car who's very brainwashed and manipulated and abused, she's not gonna raise her hand and tell the cop, I'm a sex trafficking victim. No, those words aren't gonna come out of her mouth because she doesn't even see herself as a victim, right? And so he's being taught the rules of the game by older pimps and traffickers, and I would have been his first one. And when I met him, selling drugs, that was okay, it was glamorized, it was normal. He met my family, came over for Christmas, Thanksgiving. He played the boyfriend role, and he would groom me. So what are some ways you think traffickers groom their victims? Jewelry, buying them things, expensive things, what else? Promises, always the promises. We can have a family, you can have a business, you can have anything that you want. Attention, love, right? They want to fill the voids, they want to spot your vulnerabilities and then exploit them. And I had no idea that this was going to turn into this. And we were dating, and I happen to have a friend who gets involved in the commercial sex trade, but I don't realize it. And you're 19 and your friend gets a new boyfriend and she's head over heels about him. She may disappear, okay, that's kind of normal. Until I get invited to a college party at Salem State University, and all these college boys are in their dorm and they're all drinking and partying, and they tell me that a stripper is gonna come and be the entertainment. I think nothing of it, and because it's totally normalized in our culture. And I'm so glad to see so many men in the room, right? So no condemnation or shame to any man in this room who's ever watched porn, been to a strip club, hired a dancer to be for a bachelor party, whatever, none of that. I'm just here to simply educate and really help you understand that the only reason why these women are smiling and acting like they like it is because they're being paid to. But if you really took a second and knew what was going on behind the smile, you'd realize it's just a facade, right? They're not going to tell you the legit story of their life because then that won't be fun. No one's going to pay for that. But you have to realize that porn plays a role in the fuel of commercial sex trafficking, strip clubs, the objectification of women and children in our culture and society, I have children, and I can't even go shopping at a department store and buy clothes for my 11-year-old because they're all too tight and too short and old looking. I have to like shop sometimes at like a discount, like a Savers or something to find clothes that will actually cover her body. And I can't even believe this, okay? So it's like everywhere we go, and online and so forth. So again, no condemnation or shame, but really, if you want to end sex trafficking, you have to end the demand, right? Because if there wasn't such a demand, there wouldn't be such a supply. It's simple business. And unfortunately, men are the primary source of the demand, right? So for the men in the room, again, I'm thrilled. Can we just clap, because there's a lot of men? Yes. And whether you came here on your own free will or you were dragged by your wife, I don't know, or your girlfriend, but I'm just thrilled. Have these conversations with young boys and men in your life. Follow anti-trafficking organizations online. There's some great demand organizations. I'm thinking of the EPIC Project, thinking of Demand Abolition, Exodus Cry. There are some wonderful man-led organizations that are doing this work, and we really need men to join the fight and to do this. So here I am at this party, and we're drinking, and the girl comes in, and she goes to take off her clothes to entertain us, and I realize it's my best friend. So I'm shocked, and I start to cry, and we ruin the party, and they kick us out because they're upset because she doesn't dance. And I go back home and tell my boyfriend, and he happens to know her trafficker. So a few days later, he takes me to her house, and she lives in Chestnut Hill. Do you ever think that a trafficker would live in Chestnut Hill in this fancy, expensive area with a Range Rover and a BMW in the driveway, and no one has any idea this is considered his stable, and that he has 4 or 5 women living there at any given time? And this is where they all live. And I walk in, I realize there's a whole nother language, there's a whole nother way this world operates. He has his own room, my friend has her own room, and a few of them share because there's so many of them. And she's calling these girls her wife-in-laws. So I'm realizing there's another language. I never, experienced anything like this. She calls him her man, and she says she goes to work at these bachelor parties, and she also works at a massage parlor, and she makes all this money, gives it to her man, and he buys her anything she wants. She's seeming like this is great. She's not handcuffed to a radiator, right? She's not beaten. She's not stuffed in a crate. If you would ask me what trafficking was, those probably would have been the thoughts that came to my mind. She wasn't drugged. If anything, she looked good. She had it all together. She drives a Range Rover. And all of a sudden, I start to feel like, maybe I am missing out, right? Maybe it's not that bad. So you can see over this period of time, he was grooming me. He was manipulating me. He was selling me a fake dream. And he would sprinkle seeds of doubt in there the entire time. Why would you want to work at a hair salon? You can own one. Why would you want to go to school for journalism? That's stupid. I know where you can make a lot of money. And here's the kicker. You're having sex anyways. You might as well get paid for it, right? And so all this time, and what did I really want? I just wanted him to love me. And I wanted a family. And I wanted all these things that he promised. And when it was sold and twisted as, you might as well get paid for it, you start to feel like, this is empowering. It is my body. I can do this. And no one tells you the downside. No one tells you that the commercial sex trade robs your soul each and every time. No one tells you that side. And especially when you're sober, right? When you're on drugs, you're completely numb. It's a little easier to engage in the commercial sex trade. But when you're completely sober, that's a whole nother story. And so by the time I know it, he sends me down to Hartford, Connecticut to work in a massage parlor. I had been in business maybe 20 years, very professionally ran. Today, you're not going to find American massage parlors because everything's online. What you're going to find is maybe Asian massage parlors, and that's a whole other conversation. But back then, it was all massage parlors because the internet wasn't a thing yet, maybe not as big. And I went down there sent with a duffel bag full of baby wipes, high heels, skimpy dress, condoms. My friend had kind of taught me how to talk to the sex buyers, how to do the least amount of work to make the most amount of money. And you walk in and you get buzzed in by the bouncer at the door, the security guard, and you go up and your name gets changed. So there goes the identity. So now I have to be this other person. And you'd have to be whoever the buyer wanted you to be each time, right? Because you're selling this. And you go into this lounge area that was maybe as big as this room, a little wider, very dark and musty, no windows on like the 10th or 12th floor, and all women sitting there, probably 16 to 60-year-olds, all with traffickers. and you sit on these little couches that are kind of sticky and grimy feeling, and the men come in and they pay a door fee, and then they come in with a ticket, and they get to walk around the lounge and hand whoever they want the ticket, and then you meet them around the back, they go through the locker room, shower, change, and you come around, there's a whole room, 8 or 9 rooms lined up in a hallway with a mattress and a nightstand, and you go in, you do what you do, and you exchange yourself, and I'll tell you right now, I was not prepared mentally for this. I had to completely disassociate. I had to unplug in order to survive this type of trauma. It's burned in my brain. I remember what he looked like, his name, the color of his shirt, all the details. He could have been my grandfather. I was completely horrified. I was disgusted. And he was a regular. He came every Friday. So what drives these men to purchase sex? A sexual addiction. It's a brokenness. You realize it's just like any other addiction. And what fuels that addiction is, again, pornography is a gateway into it. I don't think I mentioned that young boys today, statistically, are exposed to pornography by the time they're 7 or 8 years old, even little girls. It's becoming an epidemic for little girls. Back in the day, to find a Playboy magazine, you had to go sneak into your father or your brother's room, right, when they weren't home. Or even to buy it at the store, you had to be 18. And do you remember in the convenience store, there was a black sheet over it so you couldn't see it, it wasn't as exposed. But now today, it's so out in the open, it's just a click away. And these young boys are exposed to it young, they can become addicted, changes the chemicals in the brain, and then by the time they're 12, 13, it's on. And you can't do what you're watching on the screen with normal girls your age, because that's not really gonna work. So what happens? You become a purchaser sooner or later. So it all fuels it, it's all part of it. And so like I said, I wasn't prepared mentally, I had to shut off, disassociate, but by the same time, I was very excited by all that money he just handed me. My boyfriend told me I wasn't allowed to come out of each session without less than $100, so I had this quota to make. So I made maybe $80 or $100, and I was excited, because wow, I'm just gonna focus on the money. Now, by the time I ended up being there 2-3 days in a row, I worked 10 a.m. to 1 a.m. for a few days in a row, and you have to realize that the reason why he sent me there was on purpose. He sent me there because it was hardcore, long hours, far from home, and he was trying to break me down, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, to build me back up into a product, right? That's how you're looked at upon. You're not looked at as a human. They want to beat you down as much as they can to build you back up into the product, because that's essentially what you are. You're a moneymaker. And so he sent me down there as a test to see how, if I could pass it, if I was going to be strong enough to get through this time. Now back then, the combat zone in Boston still existed. There were still women out on the streets prostituting, all with traffickers and drug addictions. But prostitution was being cleaned up, right? Really all it was doing was being pushed indoors. I've never worked on a street track, but I know many women who have been pushed out onto the streets in Boston and other areas across the country, New York, not just in big cities, but it does happen all over the country. But going down to Connecticut was kind of like the street, but indoors. I'm trying to help you understand how hardcore it was. And so we finally came back after a few days. We show up, it's daylight, it's 6 in the morning or something. We to his apartment. I'm ashamed, I'm disgusted, I'm confused. And we get out of the car and I have a pocket full of money, and he puts out his hand. And I knew that gesture meant hand over the money. But in my mind, I start logically thinking, why would I give you the money? You weren't even there. I thought you were my boyfriend. I thought you loved me. If I have a trafficker, or, if I have a pimp, it's because I work on the streets. I need protection. I was very confused. I thought, this wasn't going to be this way for some reason. And he just looks at me and says, is there going to be a problem? And I say no. And I feel like at that moment, I lost my voice. I lost my courage. I handed it over. I go back home to my parents' house. I go back to college. I go back to the hair salon. And every few days, I would disappear and get sent to Connecticut. Now, no one was paying attention to me as a young kid, never mind a 19-year-old, right? So I had to start lying, disappearing. No one's asking questions, really. But my friends, in the salon, I have this new boyfriend. There's these red flags, right? I'm disappearing. My stories are getting weird. I have all of a sudden new pocketbooks or money. My boyfriend's coming to pick me up in an expensive car. Like these kind of red flags. Maybe another cell phone, stuff like that. Those are all red flags and things to think about. And so before I know it, I'm driving home from Connecticut with him, a couple weeks into this, and I start to change my mind. I don't want to do this. And I start to voice that. And as a way to let me know that I didn't have a choice, He hits me so hard, I'm driving, he backhands me, my head hits the window. I saw stars, I didn't know that was a real thing. My vision became blurry, I had to pull over, and he proceeds to pull me out of the car and beat me on the side of the highway. He wanted to let me know, this is how it's going to be, and if you don't do what I say, this is the repercussions. So luckily, there was another trafficker and his girl, who was a friend of mine, in the back. They pulled him off of me, threw me in the back seat. We drove home, and that's when I cried the entire time. Because I was like, oh crap, what did I get myself into? Right? It's to help you understand, it's almost like domestic violence, but on steroids. Okay? And where we are in the anti-trafficking movement is probably 20, 30 years in. Everyone kind of knows about what trafficking is nowadays. Young girls are even coming into treatment centers for drugs and identifying, saying, I'm a sex trafficking survivor. They're actually like using those words, or I'm a victim of trafficking. 5, 10 years ago, they weren't even able to use that, but because it's so much education and we're going into schools and we're talking about this, and organizations, obviously like Cape Cod Path, like we're making so much headway, we're doing so good. But it's almost like domestic violence was. It took 40, 50 years for everyone to start talking about it and notice what it is. So you add that, it's like domestic violence on steroids, right, because of the shame that's happening from the exploitation. And then another way I want to help you understand, it's in the mind, okay? It's like being in a cult. It's mental and emotional bondage. It's all about that manipulation. And that's why I've written my book. I have it here tonight for purchase. The only good, healthy coping skill I managed was to write in a journal while I was being trafficked. And I would hide the notebook so he couldn't find it. But for some reason, writing down what I was going through, not the horrific details, but just like the mental stuff that I was going through, I liked it. I didn't know it was a good thing, but I just knew I liked it, so I would write and I would hide them. And I'll explain more later. So under my trafficker for 5 years, before I knew it, completely isolated, pulled out of college, pulled out of working at the hair salon, barely saw my family. And when I did, it was brief. My mother would see the black eyes. She would, always allow me to move back in. I would escape from him numerous times throughout those 5 years. I was always known to be a runner, right? I would run out the front door, barefoot sometimes. I ran to a corner store one time, and in the middle of an argument, in the middle of a fight, he would sit me down for hours on end, berate me, belittle me, tell me I'm a no-good prostitute, no one's ever gonna love me, I'm dirty. All these things, and I would sometimes make it out the front door, sometimes I wouldn't. Sometimes he'd slam my head in between the door and the jamb. But one time I made it out, and I'm at a corner store, and I'm hiding behind the stack of newspapers, waiting for him to drive by. I see him, I feel relieved, but then I look down. I have no shoes on. I have no phone, I have no money. There was no Good Samaritan, right? There was no sticker there. And I'll tell you something about the sticker. If you're putting the sticker in places that are to try to catch victims' eye, it has to be in a language they understand, right? Like, are you trapped? Are you being abused? Are you forced to have sex and you don't want? Like, it has to be real blatant. Because I wouldn't have been able to identify with trafficking language. That wouldn't have been able to make sense to me. Maybe now a little bit again today, women are being more educated, but still. And I look down, I have no shoes on, I go back home, because where else am I gonna go? And he beats me even worse for making him come look for me, right? So what ends up happening? You lose hope. And when you're hopeless, do you fight anymore? No, you stay. Because this is it. This is it. So after being in Connecticut for so long, he moved me up to Kittery, Maine, to another massage parlor, more high class, only 45-minute ride, shorter hours, you made way more money. It was almost like how you compare street trafficking or street prostitution to high price escorting. Right, to get when women say, oh, I'm a high price escort, it's still prostitution. But we try to put a fancy name on it to make ourselves feel better about what we're doing. And so working in Connecticut, didn't realize there was a 13-year-old girl there. She's your typical story. She was a runaway from the foster care system, picked up by a local trafficker, sent up there to work, and I was there for a solid 2 years. My trafficker actually talked me into going to college while I was there. So I went to Bunker Hill Community College and got a business degree at the same time being trafficked. I paid for all my classes with cash, made it right through, made the dean's list, got all straight A's, did really well because I worked really hard because I knew he was going to take that degree away from me. So I said, if I work hard and I get this degree, I'll leave then because at least I got something out of it. Because you have to realize too, women know that they're going to walk away with zip. Now, you're going to do all that work after all those years and pour all that into it to walk away with nothing. Everything you've basically purchased, the house, the cars, all the jewelry, all the clothes, you're walking away with nothing. And I knew that, so I worked hard to get that degree. At the same time, imagine I'm in community college being trafficked and my classmate has no idea. So that's another thing. Trafficking victims always don't look a certain way. We're not always drug addicts on the street, right? Some of us sometimes are educated. And so I'm working at this massage parlor. I have a sense that it's going to get busted. For some reason, things were going down. And I talked my trafficker into letting me leave. He says, okay, but the only reason why was because the internet became popular. So I start working online, which is now inherently more dangerous because now you're in and out of people's homes and businesses. I can't tell you how many homes I went to when the wife and kids weren't there. Newton, Wellesley, Lexington, you know, plenty of places, businesses that they owned when the employees were gone. Okay, in the high-priced hotels when the men would travel into Boston for work. So I'm working in and out of hotels and homes and businesses all over New England at this point. Maine gets busted because it was an underage girl working there, right? They took 2 years to do some surveillance and finally busted the place. Now I'm online. It's been almost 5 years. I'm making so much money. To give you an idea, I would keep track of how much money I was making because I always would go to him and say, can I stop? Can I retire? Because he had so many other women working for him. He was making so much money, and he wanted to put a business as a front to run all of his money through, hence my business degree. And so to give you an idea, I did the math. I look on my little piece of paper. I made $28,000 in 30 days. That's more than I make a year at doing the work that I do, okay? Imagine the money that is made. It's $1 billion industry, more lucrative than selling drugs for sure. And I end up becoming pregnant with his child, almost 5 years into this. And I thought, great, this is my chance. I can retire, I can have the baby, the family, everything that he promised. He's gonna buy a house, he's gonna get a business. And sadly, he was making me terminate that pregnancy. I was getting excited about it, it was going further along, and there was a law in Massachusetts, I forget the time, but you couldn't have an abortion after so many weeks. And I was holding on to that, thinking, oh good, if I just make it past that time, then I can't have an abortion. And I was holding on to it, and he was pressuring and pressuring and pressuring me. So you have to understand that that is another evil in our world, right? Abortion, trafficking, exploitation, they're all very closely linked, just like drug addiction is very closely linked to the commercial sex trade. And he forces me to terminate that pregnancy, and that was it for me. I was like, I gotta go. You can use and abuse me all these years, but to make me take a life was way more than I could handle. And I knew nothing he promised me was gonna come true. So I started saving money without him noticing. I wanted to plan my escape, but this time I needed a good plan. Because every time I escaped before, I'd go to my parents' house and he'd show up. And he'd show up with diamonds and gifts, and he'd cry, promise he wouldn't hit me again, the whole sob story. But this time I thought if I got my own apartment, I was like meaning it. So how do I save a few $1,000s? Every time I'd go to work, right? I'd take a few hundred off the top. I was trained to put it in a certain place. If he wasn't home, I still did what I was supposed to do. By the way, I wanted to let you know that I did see my primary care physician the entire time I was trafficked as well. So I don't want you to think that my trafficker came with me everywhere. He didn't. I was in mental and emotional bondage, and I did what I was supposed to do. I saw my primary care physician from the time I was 18 to in my 30s. But anyway, I was always self-diagnosing myself. Depression, anxiety, ADHD, I had all these problems because I was med-seeking. Thank God I never got addicted to anything, because if I did, I probably wouldn't have been able to get out in those 5 years. I would have been trapped even longer. And forced abortion, breast implants, I was anorexic, I was probably a size 0. OCD-like type habits, right, because I couldn't control anything, so I could control what I could. Constantly lived in that fear and anxiety. Had a lump in my throat because my body was physically reacting to the stress that I was under. I'd always call it agita. Anyone else? Agita, heartburn? Okay, one Italian. Right, I would take a lot of Tums, right, trying to make that feeling go away. I didn't know my body was stressed out. So I say that because if there's, I don't know, anyone in this room who works in healthcare professions, there's so many conversations we can have about how to spot and identify and what to do for next steps to help a victim. So I save the money, a few hundred off the top each time. I put it in Ziploc bags. I tie elastics around the bag really tight, and I put it in the dirt in my big potted plants. and I wanted to save a few $1,000s so I can get my own apartment. And I knew he wouldn't look in the dirt. But how does a woman who's been in the commercial sex trade 1 year or 10 walk into a real estate agent and fill out an application? We can't. We have no job, we have no reference, we have tons of debt, substance abuse, mental illness, children to take care of, like felonies this big. We can't just walk away, and that's the purpose. It oppresses. Prostitution isn't the world's oldest profession, right? It's the world's oldest oppression for women and children, for sure. But I was determined, and by God's grace, off Craigslist, I meet a sex buyer, like a regular call. I go to his house, and he doesn't want anything sexual from me. We just hang out and watch TV, and he pays me a lot of money. And it was strange. And week after week, he would continue to call me back. So now I develop a kind of relationship with this guy because he's decent, and he's funny. He's an Italian from East Boston, like could have been cousins. Now, I'm definitely not suggesting to any man in the room that you go home and try to rescue women out of the commercial sex trade this way. But every woman who finally exits has a story. One of the survivors on our team was trafficked in New Jersey, but she happened to have an Israeli cab driver who would drive her from call to call and paid a little interest in her and asked her questions. She'd always happen to get them. He started helping her by saving money and sending it to her aunt in Massachusetts. And when she was finally ready to leave, he helped her, right? You just never know. You never know. And so this guy becomes my safe person. And I reach out to him. I say, hey, my name is Jasmine. It's not whatever. I'm in a lot of trouble. Can you help me? You own your own small business. I need pay stubs so I can get my own apartment. He makes me the fake pay stubs. I go into the real estate agency. I fill out the application, give them my cash. I have the apartment. Okay. Now I'm ready to leave with nothing, right? I pack up my 2 trash bags. I call the local police. And I say, my boyfriend's going to get mad. Can you hang out on the porch? So the cop comes, he stands on the porch, my trafficker stands here. I leave with 2 trash bags, my cat and my dog, and I get into one of the cars and I drive away. The cop didn't follow me, he didn't, obviously if I'm calling the police asking for support, it's a domestic violence situation at least, right? But okay, that's fine. I get to the new apartment, it's big, it's empty, I'm hopeless, I'm suicidal, I have nothing. I call my mom. I don't have the courage to tell her everything I've been through because who tells their mother they're a prostitute? Like, can't even say those words. And she had seen the black eyes again. She had seen me coming in and out of her home. She knew things were crazy. She bought me some furniture. She didn't ask many questions. And a little bit of time goes on. I know there's rules to this life. If I go out and work on my own as a prostitute, I'll be considered a renegade. And if I get caught, he'll kill me. Or my other option is choose another pimp, meaning he'll purchase me. But I didn't know how much more violent that guy was going to be than him. So what happens? I call him back, right? Because there's no options. And I have trauma bonds, Stockholm syndrome, where victims feel intense emotional bonds to the abuser because that's part of trauma. And again, I know there's rules to this life. So he comes to my apartment. I try to make a deal. I'll live here, you live there with all your other women. I'll give you a cut of the money. More time goes on, that doesn't work. We get into a big fight, a lot of blood, broken glass door. This time I have the courage to call 911. I would never have done that. I call 911 and they arrest him for domestic violence charges, which leads me to get a restraining order a couple days later, and that kept him away. Most traffickers are gonna stay away when it gets too crazy, because they don't wanna get in trouble, right? They're not generally gonna run after a victim because they don't wanna get caught. Right? They got too much going for them. Some of them are crazy enough to come, a lot of times they don't. So a lot of people ask me about placing survivors in safe homes and programs. Is the trafficker gonna come looking for her? Maybe, but most likely not, because they have too much going on, selling drugs and doing all this other stuff. They don't wanna get in trouble. And I was causing a scene, so he left me alone. I tried to go get a normal job, 9 to 5 as a secretary, falling asleep at the desk. I couldn't speak to anybody because I have no idea how to be normal. We call it square. I couldn't be, I was like a fish out of water, right? And then my check comes at the end of the week. I can't even buy groceries, right? I can't even pay my car payment, my insurance, my rent, nothing. So all this pressure is building up. And I start hanging out with new friends, and they're all coming over my big empty apartment, and we're all partying and drinking. Now I start dibbling and dabbling in the drugs, and I get addicted to OxyContin real fast. And I realize it's just making the pain go away. That's all I really want. I just want the pain to go away. I was off at therapy through the domestic violence restraining order. I was going to therapy and I was like, listen, I'm getting high. She said, that's not a good idea. I said, I don't care. It's working. You think I'm going to sit in front of a therapist and spill all my trauma that fresh out? No, I'm going to go use drugs, make it all go away, and try to carry on. Because you don't realize that your life is going to spiral out of control. You just want the pain to go away. So before I know it, I'm pushed back into the life of prostitution, not with a pimp, but with a giant growing drug addiction. And then, of course, life would unravel, right? Because you can't do drugs and live a normal, productive life. I'd be homeless. I'd be living on the streets, sleeping on park benches, shooting up heroin in Dunkin' Donut bathrooms, overdosing, stealing, getting arrested, all the great things that comes along with active addiction. Until my brother dies in 2006. And I had shared with you the beginning of his story. He was sexually abused as a kid, went on his whole life searching for that peace in people, places, and things, right? He lived a completely alternative lifestyle. He got engaged with prostitution himself, but he was a male prostitute. I don't think he was ever trafficked. So really involved in the whole gay lifestyle and drugs and partying, traveled the world, called himself like a high-price escort, like he justified it all, that whole party scene, contracted HIV along the way. And that party scene, finally, at 36, he overdosed on crystal meth and party, like GHB, like party drugs. And he was tired. His body was tired. And when he'd passed away and his partner called me to let me know, I was devastated and went to his services high and everything. My mother was horrified. And I had to take a good look at myself, like, wow, if I keep living like this, I'm gonna die. My parents gonna have nobody. And you don't wanna end up that way, right? I remember overdosing and EMTs so compassionately coming and knocking at me and taking me out of the overdose, looking at me in the eye, saying, what are you doing here? Go home. And I'd say to myself, where is home? And how do I get there? It's been almost a decade. No, I don't want to make my parents feel this way. I don't want to end up this way. I know I wasn't supposed to be this way. But now I'm like 27, 28. How do I get back to who I was? So I started to think about treatment. People would talk to me about AA and NA and treatment centers. I started going into treatment. I always wanted to do it my way. I didn't want to take the suggestions. I came down here to Plymouth, actually, to High Point. And I was in the treatment center, and one counselor said to me, what do you want to go to the Sinatra house and do it your way? And he sang the song to me. And I thought he was like serious, like that's how, I was like, yeah, I would like to do it my way. And I had to learn how to take the suggestions and how to surrender. And I went in and out of treatment many, many times. But finally, in September of 2007, I was done, I was tired, I wanted a better way, and I went into treatment for my last time. I turned it over, started working the steps, which again led me to a Christian church. Found a good, safe, supportive community. That's what it's about, right? The people in the church loved me. They showed me like who Jesus was by the way they cared for me. The men were appropriate. Imagine, like, they didn't want anything from me. My friends' husbands were like nice for no reason. There was no strings attached. So what did I do? I slowly got to put my trust back in humanity, right? One step at a time. Had a baby early on in recovery at like 6 months. Found the Lord, found recovery, and I thought everyone would want to. And I went back to an older relationship and got pregnant. And I was like, oh, that's not how you convert them. That's not it. Didn't realize I was still looking for validation in men, in relationships, right? So I had my child. I was probably a year sober. He's 14. Kept him alive so far. It's pretty good. Co-parent with his father, which has always been complicated and hard and messy. But what's really been even worse and harder and complicated was getting married. A couple of years after that, I got married, and that's when all my trauma bubbled to the surface. Because now I was in a relationship with a man that I had to trust and be vulnerable to. And that wasn't going to work. So after we had my daughter, we separated, and I had to seek more healing because I was a mess. You know, I had worked the steps, I had worked my recovery, I was always in substance abuse counseling, but I did not know I was a survivor, right? And everything he did to me went in that same compartment as my pimp. So he constantly triggered me, trigger. Until the more healing came. Again, it's written in the book, it's great, it's a whole story. And I was invited to a meeting one night, kind of like this, where this woman came and talked about her ministry called Route 1 Ministry. She actually goes into the strip clubs on Route 1 Saugus in other areas and makes friends with the dancers. So when they're ready to exit the commercial sex trade, she's their safe person. And I couldn't believe she was using all my old language, and I couldn't believe a regular woman who wasn't exploited goes into strip clubs. Like, this was exciting. And I raised my hand, and I have to tell her, and I'm like sweating, I was on fire, and I said, how do I help? How do I help young girls not end up like me? I had a pimp, I was on drugs, I did everything you said. And she said, you're a survivor, you're amazing. And she started to clap. And I just told my deepest, darkest secret, right? And the roof didn't set on fire, and no one judged me, and all these ladies loved me all of a sudden. You think, again, the shame, right, that is wrapped around that keeps you in darkness, keeps you sick, keeps you hidden. But we don't realize when we're transparent, when we're authentic, it opens the door for someone else to be, and the healing happens some miraculous way. And so then I found out I was a survivor, and I wanted to tell everyone else they were too. So I started making bags, and that's some of you donated. The stuff that goes in those bags. I started going to the dollar store, real simple. What do you need when you're on the street? Shampoo, conditioner, nail polish, just in case. Cute socks, maybe fuzzy ones because it's cold out. Wipes, just basic stuff, soap. And I started making these bags, and I'd fill them with my kids because I wanted my kids to know this is how we do faith, right? We don't just go to church, but like we do things. And we go and we serve women. And I drive around my minivan, and we'd go to Lynn, because that's, where I can find the women on the street, and I hand them a bag. I put some resources in there. And this one particular story is my favorite. She was walking through Lynn. It was summertime. 2 different flip-flops on, right? Her shirt's hanging off. Her pocketbook's hanging off. She's clenching onto the money. She's on the phone screaming at somebody, and she's walking down the street. And I run up to her, and I say, hey, I just want to give you this bag. And she opens the bag, and she starts to cry. How do you know I needed this? I said, I don't know. Just want to let you know. I've been there. I've got clean. I got sober. I got off the streets. If I can do it, so can you. There's a better way. I love you. And she's crying. I'm hugging her. I'm crying. It's great. I jump back in the car. My kids are still buckled in. That was good. Can't do that in Lynn, like leave your kids in a car, like whatever, but I did. It's fine. And I drive away, and my son, who we always kind of butt heads, says, Mom, when I'm like you, I want to be like you when I grow up. And I was like, yeah, all right, we're doing this, right? Like, this is good. We're going to teach these kids how to be good humans, how to teach my son how to love women and be respectful, right? And so I start doing these bags, and then people want to give me money, and they want to give me donations. And this is turning into something. They were like, what do you call it? I was like, Bags of Hope, because it's a bag of hope, like it's simple. And I partnered with the Emmanuel Gospel Center, and I came under them as a missionary, and I've been raising support under there as a homegrown missionary for the past, 9-10 years. I've worked at My Life, My Choice as a mentor to young girls under 18. I fell in love with all those young girls that have been exploited or at high risk to be. I worked for a safe home in Massachusetts called Amira. If you're interested in looking up to them, they're amazing. I helped them open their program years ago. And then the ministry just kept growing and growing and growing. So I have a really exciting announcement, I guess I could say at this point. Not only do we give bags, do we run groups in halfway houses, do we meet the women who are in the halfway houses to help them self-identify, know that they're survivors, know they're not alone, know that there's actually healing from commercial sex trade and addiction. We mentor, we walk alongside, we give the bags, we send women to safe homes all over the country, but we are able to open up a home next year in New Hampshire for women. Yes. Which has always been my deepest desire and my dream, but I've just been waiting, right, and doing the next right thing. I guess I can also say reconcile with my husband, had another baby, right, so she's 5. Like I said, I homeschooled the smallest one, so there's 5 kids all together. And in the midst, somehow, I've partnered with this amazing couple who purchased a home, 17 bedrooms, and they're gonna rent it to us for $1 a month. And we just have to pay all the utilities, of course, and we can have up to, 17 beds, but I'm not gonna take that many women. Up to 12, maybe 10 women with children. And we're gonna let them live there for a year or 2 to work on their healing, their recovery. We're gonna have a business attached where the women can make lotions and soaps. We want goats on the property, so they can make goat soaps and lotions, so forth. Teach them business skills. I'll tell you, a lot of these women have wonderful business skills. They can survive. We just wanna help them turn into something productive and good, right? Teach them how to just turn that a little bit and really empower and support them. So I'm really excited. If you want to stay in touch with me and follow us, my website is jasminegrace.org. You can come buy the book, get our information, help us raise $300,000. by next summer, or this summer coming, because that's how much it costs to run that house. We're going to have some fundraisers throughout the year. We're going to have some galas. If you're interested in helping us run fundraisers or anything like that, please let me know. I have one amazing person to kind of put on the spot here. I have two amazing women from my team, Cindy and Jen. But Jen is a survivor that I've met in recovery. I went to her halfway house and ran a group. She was in my group. She received a bag. She didn't know she was a survivor until she went through our group. I don't even think she still wanted to recognize that she was a survivor. It took her a long time. We've walked alongside her for 6 years. She's now on our team. She does our marketing. She does our social media. She makes us amazing sweatshirts and merch. So can you give my two awesome teammates a hand? And that is our whole point, right? We come alongside, we meet the women, we walk, we take the time, we pour into them and empower them to become survivor leaders. Because that's the whole point, right? Pass the baton. So that's the work we do. If you have any other questions, please come talk to us. I don't know how much time we have left. I don't know if we're filling bags. Yes, we can have questions. Any questions? I didn't depress you guys that bad. There has to be, there's hope, right? We do recover. Yes.
What's the best thing to do if you suspect?
Oh, guess it's good. It's not going to. I'll repeat the question.
What's the best thing to do if you suspect somebody may be a victim of trafficking?
What is the best thing to do if you suspect somebody is a victim of trafficking? Do you know the person, or are you just suspecting something out there? Because I feel like there's two different responses.
Good question.
Yeah.
How about both?
Okay. So if you are in a relationship with somebody and you suspect trafficking, I say you be supportive, non-judgmental as much as possible, safe, ask questions as necessary, as led, like not prying, right, but being available, and listen to the story. Listen to what's going on. Again, a lot of times drug addiction is going to be connected to that. And I know it's really hard, and you have to be really compassionate. And remember, at the end of the day, mercy always triumphs judgment. Okay, it's hard, but that's, you got to stick it out in the long run. And then if you suspect trafficking happening in the community, I would definitely call your local police. I'm not familiar, but I'm sure Cape Cod Path knows if they have relationship with local law enforcement. And some law enforcement still haven't been trained to this day. Most have. Law enforcement has come a long way. It's amazing. And they work in a team, you know, with a social worker, healthcare providers, or they have a whole team. They're not arresting the women as perpetrators anymore. They're seeing them as victims and offering services. It's great and helpful. So I would call my local police. I would call the National Human Trafficking Hotline. The more you put in tips to that hotline, the better. Because if you put in a tip, you put in a tip, they start, you know, realizing, okay, this is a hot spot, and they can then inform local police, FBI, Homeland Security, whoever, and, you know, put in a raid or however that works in the back. I don't know. But those are my big suggestions. Yeah. How many of you, is this like your first time at a human trafficking awareness event? Great, okay. And so to hear it firsthand is probably impactful and good. And if you have more questions later, please feel free to reach out. I'll tell you, I spoke to many parents. I go to these events and parents will come up to me and say their daughter is probably being actively trafficked. Yes, it was here, yes. That's right. And I also want to say, too, again, not all traffickers are men. I think you said that they can be women. And some of the women I work with today, their own mothers were their first exploiters, right? Because the mother has an addiction. So the mother trades the daughter for the drugs. Very common. So I don't want you to think it's only men. Yes?
Are there specific things you might look for in raising children in terms of helping them to know to be protected, what things to look for, what kind of self-esteem, or whatever it is?
Yeah. Education is empowering, right? So there's a great book out there called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. You can read it age appropriately to your children. It protects them against being addicted to porn. Because it's not about when they're exposed, it's not about if they're exposed, it's when they're going to be exposed to porn. So you want to educate them beforehand. You can educate 3 to 5 years old, okay? There's a great book, Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. Having filters, obviously, on your kids' phones. You can't hand them an iPhone and say, good luck, right? You have to have filters. A lot of parents don't know there's a cell phone company called Pinwheel. That's what my children have. You have no access to social media or the internet. It ain't happening. Pinwheel. There's another one called Gab Wireless. I should get like paid for telling people about that. Because they're hard to find. They're hard to find, right? Obviously. Pinwheel and Gab Wireless. Having filters on the phone like Bark. If they do have an iPhone, put Bark on there, or Covenant Eyes. That's another really good filter. Yep. So education, watch real documentaries. Again, Exodus Cry is a wonderful organization to follow. And you want to read survivor books. Watch real documentaries. Have these conversations. I go to middle schools, I go to high schools, I speak to kids. If you're a teacher, if you work in a school system, invite us in. You know, I would love to talk to the kids and have these conversations early on, for sure. Do you have another question? Yeah. The youngest age I've seen is 11. Personally, yes.
Okay, are you familiar with that? I'm not. Okay, I also have Teens Against Trafficking resource book, and this is by In Our Backyard, Human Trafficking in Our Backyard, and it's $5, and it is amazing. It is amazing. We have gone into Nauset Middle School to do some education with the classes, and we give them each one of these. So that's one of our task force members' suggestion is we are going to go into more schools. But this is excellent. So this is really good. In Our Backyard is another great organization too. They're the ones that give out the freedom stickers. But they do a lot of good education for teens and for schools. Bend, Oregon.
Yeah. Shared Hope International is also another great resource. They have a lot of materials you can use. No questions. Usually people ask me what happened to the guy who helped you get out, what happened to your trafficker, what happened to your mother, like nothing. All right, what happened to my trafficker? Nothing. Nothing has happened to my trafficker. He's not in jail. By the time I figured out I was a survivor, and by the time I got involved in the anti-trafficking movement, it had been 10 years past the statute of limitations. So what I did was talk to my contacts at Homeland Security and FBI, and I've given his name, his information, because I thought that was the least I could do, just in case he pops up somewhere. Early on in my recovery, I was maybe 2 years clean. I did not know I was a survivor yet. I was on Facebook, and I had my son, so I posted pictures of my son, like every mother does, I guess. And he contacted me through a private message without a picture. So he created an account just to reach out to me, and the message was this long. That baby should have been ours. I have everything I promised you, the family, the business. I bought a house. He bought a house in Billerica. And I have everything. Come back. And I said, don't ever bleep and contact me again. And I, deleted the message, and he replied, no, I really do, I'm sorry, and all this stuff. And I freaked out, and I had just gotten married, very new into the marriage, and I freaked out, and I deleted everything, and I went silent for a while, off of Facebook, off everything in life. And then when the healing came, I felt more empowered, and obviously now I'm no longer a victim, I'm a survivor, and I'm out there doing the work. And then I've written the book, and essentially, I've spoken to traffickers who were part of that circle. I want to let you know, traffickers don't normally operate alone. They're connected to a bigger circle. So my trafficker had about 5 or 6 other traffickers in his network. There was tons of women. And I've been very public, obviously, with my story, my website, so forth. How I wrote my book was I started a blog. So I went back into my old journals, because I got to save them at my parents' house, and I'd open up the journals and I'd blog exactly what was written. And I realized, wow, this is depressing. So I started putting present day reflections to let people know we do recover. This is how we recover. This is how you can walk alongside someone who's recovering. And it took me 2 years, and I published it into the book. So as I'm coming through one day, dropping my son off at a football practice, I'm walking through the park, and one of the traffickers is coming towards me. And I had just spoken at Harvard, so I felt all smart. I had a lanyard on that said Harvard. And I was dressed professionally. And we meet in the field, and he just starts to spill all the beans. Now, this guy got addicted to drugs. Now, that's not common, right? Most traffickers don't have a drug addiction, or it's not too out of control. They want the women to be on drugs sometimes to control them, or not, because then you get really messy, right? So they don't want that involvement. But he got addicted, which isn't, again, normal. And he was addicted to heroin, and he became really messy, so they kind of shunned him. Long story short, he dropped off his 9-year-old at cheerleading, his daughter. And he just starts to spill all the beans and tell me everything. And I said, you know, it's not cool what you guys did to all of us. And what if someone did that to your daughter? How would you like it? No, I know. My brother made me do it. They were all doing it. I thought it was cool. And then I said, you know, yeah, it's not good. And I started to explain things. And he said, I know, you wrote a book. And so, everyone knows what I've done. My trafficker knows where my parents live, and I go to bed today, lay my head on the pillow with complete peace, right? I don't have fear, I don't carry that around, I've done my part. I've spoken countless people across this country about trafficking in small girls, young girls. Do you think I care? I don't, right? Come find me, let's have a conversation about this. Through my recovery, I've forgiven him. I think forgiveness, I know it's controversy, right? But forgiveness has a big link in healing of trauma. And a lot of women in the anti-trafficking movement who are survivors haven't worked through that. So they're very angry and they're hard to work with. But when you work through the process and you forgive your abuser and you forgive you, things change. And so that's where I am today, and I just really pass that along. So I think I've done enough work where it's okay that he's not in jail. I bumped into women at treatment centers who have been trafficked currently by his brother, who are in drug recovery treatment center, and she heard my story. I came in there to speak to the women. She heard my story, and it sounded familiar to her, so she asked me later, were you with such and such? And I said, yeah. She goes, I'm with his brother. And so, yeah, crazy things. And what happened to the guy who helped me get the apartment? He ended up not being the safest guy on the planet, right? He had a corner store as a front because he sold cocaine. But he never touched me, right? He never was abusive. He never did anything inappropriate in that sense. So, yeah, there's that story. And my parents found out about my whole story when I started doing the ministry, giving out bags in my community. I ended up on the front page of the local paper. And I thought, wow, maybe I should talk to my mom about this. I'm in the paper. And I show her the paper, and she yells at me and throws the paper at me and says, you told the whole world you are a prostitute. She had to whisper it. And I said, oh, this woman feels so much shame, right? She's so upset. And it's not her fault. I don't, you know what I mean? I'm not trying to blame her. It's all right. I'm past that. It's fine. She got upset. Great. I show it to my father. He reads it. He goes, I'm glad you're better. Man of very few emotions. Okay. More time goes on. I end up on Channel 7 News, 11 o'clock. She watches it religiously. I'm downstairs. I live beneath them. They're upstairs. The news comes on. First I tell her, Mom, I'm going to be on Channel 7 tonight, just so you know. And she gets all angry, slams the door. And then a couple days goes by. She doesn't come down the stairs, which is great. But a couple days goes by, and I see her, and she says, you know, Jazz, I'm sorry. You've been through that. I see it on the TV, I see it in the paper, and I feel so bad for those girls. How do I not feel bad for my own daughter? I'm sorry. And I was like, all right. And she has a copy of my book. She can't read it. She still struggles severely with her own mental health stuff. But my dad, he's my biggest fan. He shares all my Facebook things. He thinks I'm famous. My kids think I'm famous. It's funny. It's great. And to see his relationship with my kids is very redeeming. Very redeeming. He loves those kids. Yeah, so it's good. Yeah.
Should we as community members be concerned about sexualized material in libraries and drag queens reading to children?
Yes, you should be concerned.
What would your thoughts?
Yeah, I tell you, our culture is upside down and inside out, right? What we've thought could get worse is only getting crazier. And yes, it's starting young. I have friends who have their kids in the public school system in Seabrook, New Hampshire. She's a first grader, a little girl, and she was sent home with a book about a boy wanting to be a girl. It's all about transgenderism and that this is being normalized. So, yeah, I think we should be concerned, and it's something that we should do, and speak to the libraries and run for council or school board or whatever we can do, for sure.
If I may, we're involved with a group that is looking to create education for the parents. So it's not pushing back at the libraries, it's getting the parents smart about it so they don't take their kids to that library. And I'd love to get more information from you about all of it.
Sure. Yeah. It's like unsafe to visit the library, imagine. Yeah.
One other question too, and you had mentioned it along the way, it takes three, the trafficker and also the sex buyer. Are there interventions to stop that?
Yes. Those couple of organizations I mentioned, EPIC Project and the Demand Abolition, are two big anti-trafficking organizations that I can think of. And there's a really cool section of EPIC Project called A Bunch of Guys. And actually it was created in Oregon. We just mentioned Oregon. And a bunch of guys, it's all around the country, they volunteer, they get together, and they create fake ads on the adult websites, Craigslist, whatever adult websites there are, and it makes the men call to purchase sex, and they interrupt the demand by picking up the phone and saying, hey dude, it's not okay to buy sex, and they try to have a conversation and educate. Some guys hang up right away. Some guys actually stay on the phone long enough, or sometimes they get into a text conversation with them. So I think that's amazing. Yeah, yeah.
What do you see the impact is with internet now? A lot of it is just online.
Everything.
Interaction and, you know.
I know. So COVID, right, has made the internet even bigger than it already was. And I'll tell you right now, have you heard of OnlyFans? Okay, so be aware of an app or website called OnlyFans. Do you know what Instagram is? Okay, so Instagram, women were on there posting provocative pictures of themselves to gain followers, to gain attention, whatever it is. Now, OnlyFans comes along and it explodes because of COVID. And it's a way that you can post provocative pictures or blatant naked pictures of yourself, and you gain a subscription base. So if you want to look at my pictures, you have to become my subscriber. And you pay me whatever it is, monthly or however it works, to be my subscriber. Now you can reach out to me personally through private message and request certain types of pictures. And this becomes a slippery slope into worse things. And a lot of girls don't even need a trafficker per se, because they're exploiting themselves because of the thinking. Well, I'm already posting half-naked pictures of myself on Instagram. I might as well do it on OnlyFans and make money. College girls are approached by this constantly. College girls are approached by sugar daddies constantly as a way for companionship, and I'm going to pay your way through college, or I'll provide you with an apartment, and all I want you to do is come to dinner with me. But where does that open the door to, right? There was even on UNH campus a few years ago, sugar daddies posting flyers looking for companions on college campuses. But to horrify you about the internet, OnlyFans, I just explained what it was. You would think college, maybe high schoolers. I spoke at a middle school, and I asked the students, how many of you have an OnlyFans or know somebody that does? And the majority of them raised their hands. 6th to 8th graders. That is young. And because of COVID and the internet, how that exploded, webcamming. Have you heard of Tate? What's his name? Tate. His last name is Tate. Andrew Tate, have you heard that story? Talking about Ukraine and Romania. Go Google Andrew Tate later and see what he did with all the webcamming and all that behind the scenes. It's crazy. One more question? Yes. What happened to my best friend? Great question. So I don't know. I Google and Facebook her all the time, can't find her. And when I happened to meet that guy coming through the field, that same story, I asked him, where's Leanne? And he said, oh, she stole money. Now, she was with his brother, and he told me the story that her brother was perfectly healthy and in good shape, and he was in his 40s, and he went to the gym, and he had a stroke and lost everything on the left side of his body, lost complete control. And he was in and out of the hospital for a few years because of the stroke. And while he was in and out of the hospital, she stole 60 grand. And I said, she didn't steal it, that was hers, and she could have stole a lot more. And he said, and she bought herself a house. And I said, yes, okay. So it was great. So I still don't know if she's involved. She's obviously very quiet. She's not on any social media, but I know that at least she got out from under him, bought herself a house, and I think she had a child somewhere in there. But I haven't had the chance to connect. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Wow, who was encouraged and inspired that there is hope in this world? Raise your hand. Yes. I want to recognize our wonderful police representatives, and thank you for your service. Would you mind to wave to us, and we wanted to give you a hand? Thank you for being here. Thank you so much. Thank you. And using this opportunity, I would like to let you know that on February 18th, there will be, it's Saturday evening, Valentine's week. We will have a talk on relationship by a therapist and strong family, strong community. So you're welcome to come to that. Another thing, one of the targets, people who target to human trafficking, is emotionally and psychologically vulnerable. So on February 28th, which is last day of February in the evening, we will have a talk on mental health and depression. Last week ago, a student from 9th grade from St. Paul school committed suicide and hung himself. So depression and suicide is at our doorstep, and it's all linked, like you said. So February 28th, we will have an incredible therapist, more than 30 years experience. So please come, mental health, we have to talk about it. You're welcome to be part of this event. Please give me a favor, buy a book before you leave. It will be out there. A Diary of Jasmine Grace, please. Another favor, since we're a new business, would you be so kind to give us a Google review that we are involved in the community? It will help us tremendously, as you know. Thank you so much for being here. You're welcome to linger, ask questions. If you have any questions that you would like to ask Jasmine, please do. Like I said, last year there was a couple who got resources from her because their daughter was trafficked. Once again, thank you so much for not being indifferent and being open and being involved. And let's see each other next year. Spread the word about human trafficking, and let's make this world a better place, okay? Thank you very much for being here. And group picture, if we can have this wonderful, is it a new chief officer from Orleans we have here? Thank you, nice to meet you. Come over here, we would love to have a picture with you. And all the wonderful social workers we have, and from the police department, Mel, and Safe House, and all the, and I want to say thank you to Miss Jen. Miss Jen, please stand up. She is quiet behind the scenes, but she helped to put this all together. Let's give her a hand. Thank you so much, Miss Jen. Detective Katie.
Detective Katie Parachi, come on up. Natalie Fashada, Officer Natalie Fashada, come on up.